So assume you are once very rich and powerful among your peers. You are so rich that when you went out with your friends, you often paid the bills and your friends used to come to you when they were stranded or when they wanted favors. One day, however, you lost your job and subsequently lost your money and power. The situation was so bad that you became homeless and couldn't afford even the basic of things. Most of the people you regarded as friends laughed and gossiped about you whenever they could. As time went by, however, you had enough and couldn't take the humiliation anymore. You therefore decided to fix your life and you took an interest-free loan from one of the few people who still checked on you. From that money, you ended up establishing yourself and become more wealthier than you were before. You became not just rich among your peers, but you also were considered as the second wealthiest person in the world, with the potential of becoming the richest. Well, that's the story of riches to rags and back to riches, and that summarizes the China story. For us to understand the China of today, we have to visit some of its past. From written records and archaeological data, it is not hard to miss the fact that China used to be successful. Just like today, the Chinese people were big in building, and that can be demonstrated by the Great Wall of China. The only difference was they used a lot of slave labor back in the past. The Chinese story starts with Qin Shi Huangdi, who unified much of China between 221 and 206 BC. It was during this time when construction of the Great Wall of China began. This period was also known as the First Golden Age. Between 206 BC and 220 AD, China witnessed a huge economic growth and also spread its culture. About 400 years later, its second golden generation began and China was able to extend its sphere of influence all into Central Asia. By the 13th century, the Mongols had conquered China and united much of it under their rule and made Beijing the capital. Westerners such as Marco Polo started visiting the country, and that marked the start of contact between China and the West. This not only led to the successful trading relationship between China and the other countries, but also led to death and destruction when Mongols swept across the Asian continent while invading Europe. In 1368, the Ming dynasty overthrew the Mongols and ruled over the country. The new dynasty moved away from warfare and conquest and decided to focus on the country. Fast forward to the 19th century. During this century, Western powers were colonizing many parts of the world, China included. During this time, its economy had been crippled and a lot of foreign intervention leading to exploitation of its government and people were taking place. Together with Russia and Japan, Western governments forced China into concession and weakened its ruling body. In 1931, Japan invaded China and occupied it. However, this didn't last so long. In 1937, the different factions rose up and fought the Japanese and eventually took back the country. China had gone through decades of suffering and weakened economy. This period was known as the period of great humiliation, and many leaders today look back to it with much of disgust. After the period of the great humiliation, Mao Zedong, the leader of the Communist Party, took over after winning the civil war against the nationalist side. That was in 1949. From past glory and the lessons they learned from being poor and helpless, the Chinese leader wanted to make amends. Mao Zedong then rolled out the Great Leap Forward, a 5-year economic plan that was meant to lift the Chinese people out of obscurity. It entailed collective farming and introduced labor-intensive industries. This plan ended up being a failure, with many Chinese citizens dying out of starvation. Chief Mao, as he was commonly known, didn't give in. He then introduced the Cultural Revolution policy, which lasted for another 10 years. This was meant to promote the spirit of nationalism. This, again, didn't work. Instead, triggered a lot of protests. After the trial and error and leading to many people dying, Chief Mao Zedong eventually died in 1976 and was succeeded by Deng Xiaoping, who had a policy to lead China to the direction that will make it successful. He knew how important the workforce will be in ramping up the economy, especially in providing cheap labor. He, however, faced a problem. The population of China during that time had exploded, and that meant there were more people than the resources at that time. To curb that, he introduced the one-child policy and granted peasants the right to farm in their own plots instead of relying on the communist distribution system. He also introduced the open door policy, which allowed diplomatic relations and enabled the country to have more foreign investments. This, together with providing cheap labor, meant that China had a lot of money being poured in. The policy also allowed for a market economy and the development of a private business sector. China also signed a declaration to restore cooperation with Russia. This allowed for further economic opportunities and led to the country being ranked the third largest economy. In 1999, China celebrated its 50th anniversary, and the following year, the government cracked down on corruption. They chose public execution as their preferred way of punishing corrupt officials. This led to a reduced corruption rate among the political class, and more money was getting down to the common man. In 2001, China went ahead and met with Russia, Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, and Uzbekistan to create the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. This benefited China as it promoted trade and combated ethnic and religious militancy in the countries. Having the third largest economy, only behind Japan and United States of America, China was getting the recognition it needed, and with that, it joined the World Trade Organization that allowed it to negotiate with other countries and have lower tariffs on its goods. With the favorable tariffs on its goods, the Chinese economy grew faster than ever, and it was able to bring most of its citizens out of poverty. They also invested in their military and the space programs. China also began stretching its influence in Africa and other developing countries by providing loans and credits. This, they hope, will give them leverage in the future. Having curbed corruption and having lower tariffs on its goods enabled China to grow its industries and therefore became one of the leading exporters of the world. And in 2010, China officially became the world's largest exporter, and the following year it overtook Japan to become the second largest economy in the world. Its economy continued to grow until 2014 when it slowed down. It is still growing, just a bit slower than before. The Chinese economy has enabled the country to grow into one of the most powerful nations in the world. This is, however, not surprising, as China was great even in the past. China performed one of the greatest economic miracles by lifting millions out of poverty and better off using money from abroad to benefit its people. Yes, I do agree that there's a lot of things the Chinese government could have done better, like treating the Uyghurs not like slaves, and also offering better loans and credit terms to Africa and the developing countries. All in all, we can't write off what they have achieved in the last 50 years or so. Just like Africa, China had a great past. However, along the way, they fell behind. That did not discourage them. Instead, they took up lessons and learned from their mistakes, and they were able to recreate what they had in the past, and right now, they are one of the most successful countries in the world. If all African countries could borrow a leaf from them and probably recreate what we had, the past glory that we had as a continent, I think we'll be in a better place to forge our own path and forge our own future. I conclude this video by saying a generation which ignores its histories has no past and has no future. And China, through their leader, knew this well. That's why they were quick to revisit their past mistakes and they were able to forge a path that led them into success. My name is Mohandisi Ian, and I make videos about my interests and the things I enjoy. They include videos about power, crime, economics, startups, among other things. If the videos I make are your cup of tea, I urge you to subscribe, like, and leave a comment if you may. Till next time, bye-bye.